Hey guys, welcome back to Talk Story with me, Gavin Sugai. I am here with Bud Stonebraker. Bud, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, Gavin. It's good to be here.
All right, so Bud, a question that probably a lot of people are asking you is, why are you running to become the mayor of Honolulu?
Why am I running to be the mayor of Honolulu? Well, it was about 5 months or so ago when we faced these lockdowns, and I've followed this story very closely, and I became increasingly concerned that our lockdown measures were, um, to a certain extent, an overreaction. Because as I followed the science of the coronavirus, I recognized that the United States lockdowns and shutdowns, especially some of the states, especially ours, and ours is particularly concerning because we are an island. And so quarantines and lockdowns and so forth, they hit us particularly hard because we are primarily a tourist economy. Many people don't like that. We want to diversify, of course, and that's a good thing to do, and we should do that. But for the immediate needs of our people, we should open up. And so as I saw these mandates coming, and they said testing, tracing, treating, um, those things sound good, but they have some nefarious, let me say, things on the side. For example, the testing, the numbers are being used in many ways to create a state of fear and panic, and because we've always had these numbers. We've always had coronavirus positive cases without being monitored. And the concern for some is that they are asymptomatic. That is, that people don't get sick. But that shouldn't be a concern. That should be something that we recognize as part of the natural process of gaining herd immunity. And so when they talked about testing, my neighbor, she was tested before she gave birth to her son. She gave birth about 6 weeks ago. And they said that if she tested positive, they would take her baby away from her. Now that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous because a young woman and a baby they're virtually, um, statistically, um, not going to be affected so harshly. That the median age of death is 82 years old. So this is primarily a disease that affects really harshly older people. And some 40 to 45% of the deaths that we've seen in the United States have taken place in care homes. So this is the real main focus of where we should protect our citizens. 80% of those people who have died from COVID are over the age of 65, which tells us that our working force can be working. It's a far less likelihood of catastrophic disease. There are new treatments. There are many treatments that we've discovered that are good, that we should be looking at. And so I felt like some of the science was going in one direction, but the mandates were going in a political direction. And the testing, in fact, there was a woman in Canada who lost her baby for 6 weeks because she tested positive for COVID. Not 6 weeks, I'm sorry, 55 days. So quite a substantial period of time. And then the tracing is a civil rights catastrophe. To have the government following people around and sharing their medical information through Google or Apple is an enormous concern for us. On top of that, you have a governor that's proclaimed an emergency state and suspended sunshine laws and many other things in order to keep this state of emergency and this lockdown. But that period of emergency of 60 days has passed 2.5 months ago. And so we're kind of in a quasi-government of, it's an unconstitutional sort of form of government that we have. It's very strange. It's been very convoluted. And if the testing and the tracing wasn't bad enough, the treatment, the World Health Organization and various health departments around the country have said that they'll knock on your door and they'll remove people who have coronavirus. Now, this is for a disease that has a case fatality rate on par with the flu or a bad flu. I know it's not the flu. And anytime you say something like this, people will criticize you. But we have to be real practical, and we have to be clear about the science. Sometimes you'll get a common cold and the doctor will say, well, this is viral. And we understand viral.
Oops, sorry, we lost you a little bit.
Its course.
Oops, sorry, we lost you a little bit.
My wife.
Oh. Okay, I think it's clearing up now. Okay.
I switched Wi-Fi's. 20% of the time when you get a virus cold, it's caused by 4 different coronaviruses. So these are things that the media hasn't been telling us. And that's not to say it's the same coronavirus. See, here's the thing. Whenever you offer some science that is good news, there are people who want to hold on to the fear. But we have a lot of good news. There are many medications that treat this. The case fatality rate is orders of magnitude less than what the World Health Organization has told us. And we've seen some skewing of numbers from coroners early on, from the need for ventilators and financial money coming in for cases of coronavirus throughout the country. So a lot of these things have been skewed. So as I saw this progression, I felt like we were going to either end up in one of 2 places, either absolute poverty or in prison camps. Because, and I tell you what, if I told myself this 6 months ago, I'd say, you're crazy, Bud, that sounds, out there. But they have said this. They have said that this is what we're going to do. And with the contact tracing, they now want to put you on quarantine for 2 weeks, even separating you from your pets. For, again, something that is far milder than they first told us. Yes, I know that it is a deadly disease. Coronavirus is novel. We don't know much about it, but we're learning a lot. But these protocols that they're forcing and putting in place will be so utterly devastating for Hawaii that we may not see a recovery within the next decade. So when the time came, I put my name in the running because I felt like we had to do something. Because with the current agenda or the current narrative, we are going to end up in poverty. It's going to destroy our state. And so with that great concern, I threw my hat in the ring and I'm running for mayor now.
Awesome. All right, so let's go back in time for a bit and let's talk about your time growing up in Sunset Beach. And your mom worked at Kuilima Hotel, which is now the Turtle Bay Resort, and your dad helped to shape surfboards for the Lightning Bolt brand. What was life like when you grew up?
It was great. My dad moved here in the 60s, and he didn't move here to shape surfboards. He moved here and he started a surfboard repair company. He had worked for Greg Knoll in California, who's very well known and famous. And somebody had told him, hey, the real money is in repairing surfboards. So he moved here with my mom, who was still a teenager at the time. They were married. They had 1 child. And he moved all the way from California. The first time he flew over here, he said that it was a propeller plane and the flight took like 12 or 18 hours. So he came over early on. But I think of the bravery and the courage to bring a wife and a child in order to be a surfboard repair. But he did. He started repairing surfboards. We lived in Kailua at first, and then they moved to the North Shore, just next to Sunset Beach. And he had a shop in town, and eventually he opened another shop, and he started shaping surfboards for Lightning Bolt. He became one of the few that shaped on the North Shore, and so that was great. I grew up on the beach. The ocean was my playground. As comfortable in the water as anywhere else, and I couldn't think of a better place to grow up than the North Shore of Oahu. And my mom also, we were very poor, and she worked at IGA as a cashier as well in Haleiwa. So between working as a maid at the Kuilima and a cashier, we spent our time hanging out at the beach and surfing at Ehukai and Pupukea. So I loved it. I loved it growing up out there. I played soccer as a kid. I didn't surf too much until I got older. And when I went to college in California, I started surfing in California, but I was always in the water. So I do surf now. And it was a great, great upbringing.
And let's talk about your time as a state representative in Hawaii. So you've been a state representative from 2000 to 2006. Tell us about that experience.
Well, that was quite an experience. I was 28 years old at the time, and my wife and I we had just had a baby, and our first daughter was born. And I was taking some classes, doing some study on American history and some of the things. I went to public school. I graduated from Kaiser High School, so um, much of my education, you have to be self-motivated. So I was learning. I was looking at our history, and at that point, when you start having kids, you start thinking, I want to make sure that there's something for the future of my kids, and I need to be involved. And I hadn't been involved as much as good citizens should have. So I thought, well, I'll be a good example because I was in ministry at the time. I was a pastor, and I knew enough about politics to at least put my name in the running and get some experience. But I really did it primarily to be an example for other people to be involved. But then when I got in the race, I remembered that I'm naturally competitive. And so when I was in the race, I thought, well, I'm not going to get in here to lose. I'm going to get in here to win. And so, of course, the first election is the primary, and there were 5. I was a Republican at the time. I was going to run as an independent because I didn't have a party affiliation. But somebody reminded me, they said, are there any independents? No, they're not, because people don't vote for independents. So you better pick a party. So I chose the Republican Party at the time, and I ran as a Republican. And in that race, there were 4 others. So me and 4 others. And then on the Democrat side, there were 4 Democrats. And so it was kind of a free-for-all. I picked a time to run when there was the incumbent was dropping out. David Stegmeyer was his name. He was a Democrat, and I actually voted for him the first time I ever voted. So I was not a party person, and I'm still not. But I ran, and I won the primaries. And then I thought, well, I better just go all in. And I won the general, and I became a state representative. And I didn't know what to do. At that point, I had to learn everything that there was about a bicameral system and, the legislature, and they put me on committees and this and that. And I learned so much, and it was good learning, but it wasn't easy learning. Much of what I learned about the inside of politics is that, what you see on the outside is one thing, but then there's an inside game as well. And it was a little frustrating because many of the decisions seem to have been made before the hearings or before decisions were made outside of the public view. I remember seeing people coming, and maybe they would want to testify on a bill that was important to them. Maybe they were a business owner or a parent, or they were homeschooling, or they just had particular concerns about a bill. And they would come to the legislature and they would feed the meter all day long with quarters to try to feed their children as they were there testifying. And many times the committee hearings, they would just be pushed back. And when bills weren't popular, they would just have a long recess and they would wear people out. And in the meantime, those people who were maybe concerned with legislation and opposing it, there was all of the departments of the government that were paid to be there, and they were there every single day. And I thought, this is just not a fair system. Sometimes we're concerned about lobbyists. Well, in Hawaii, the government is its own lobbyist. The departments that are getting funded from the state are there at the legislature every single day to ask for more funding. And so you have this system where it's not outside lobbyists and special interests. The special interests are the government, and the lobbyists are the government. So it created a very unique situation. And the politics side of it was a little frustrating for me because I don't see people as Democrat or Republican. Most people don't. I've never met somebody and the first thing they asked me was, are you a Republican or a Democrat or a Green Party or Libertarian, Aloha Aina Party? I think in Hawaii we're proud not to be moved by superficial things like that. But in politics, that's just the way it was. And it was a little distasteful. I didn't like those divisions that came naturally. And so when I left the legislature, I left the party as well. And I returned to ministry and ultimately farming, because we eventually bought a ranch out in Waimanalo where we're now farming. And so the legislature was, I left about 15 years ago. And haven't looked back until now.
Awesome. Thank you for that response.
I gotta just trying to make sure I have access to my Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah,
so
definitely. Yeah, especially for the second portion, I wouldn't want to have to cut you off. But yeah, let me know when your connection's good to go. It's stuck on your face right now. Okay. Oh,
how's that?
oh
1 second.
yeah, no worries.
Forgive me for that, Gavin. Just trying to adjust the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, good thing this is not the time portion yet, but we're you have some time to adjust. No, it's good now. It's good. All right, so let's fast forward to today. So a big aspect of your life is your work in ministry, being the senior pastor at the Ranch Church Christian Fellowship and starting a call farm, like you were just saying. Based on your background and all your experiences, why do you think that you have the qualifications to be a mayor of Honolulu?
Well, one of the things that has been lacked in city and state government is common sense. Common sense falls by the wayside when special interests and favors have to be returned. And of most of the candidates, especially those that are considered to be in the top tier, they all owe people and connections and companies and unions. I'll be one of the only candidates that when I get in office, I won't owe anybody anything. And we can just attack the problems that we have without the complications that go along with, this network, this long-standing network of pay to play and favors. And I think that's one of the things that's strangling our economy and our well-being is you have these systems that have been placed in so long that serve certain people, but not the general population, not the general public. And that's why people are so frustrated. They see constant construction, they see billions of dollars being spent on the rail, but the roads in their own neighborhood are falling apart. And that's because our priorities are wrong. And I believe that, everything that the government is tasked to do, the city government, we have a moral obligation. If you pay for the roads to be fixed, the city is morally obligated to fix those roads. And there's just been almost a criminally negligent approach to serving the people of Hawaii. You just can't get things done here. I mean, ask anybody that's tried to get a permit, or it's just so frustrating. I mean, we have a
Sorry, losing you a bit.
housing problem in Hawaii, but you're losing me again.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I have this impoverished Wi-Fi. I don't know what's going on here.
It's clearing up now, so I can see you pretty good.
So I really believe we just have to go back to the core essential functions of the government, which is paving the roads, upgrading our water systems, picking up the trash and the abandoned vehicles, and not throwing money. Millions of dollars have been thrown to studies and companies that are related to the mayor or the mayor's city director. These are kinds of things, audits have been done, and we've found that departments are not fulfilling their obligations, but those get ignored. That was one of the things that frustrated me years ago in the legislature is we'd have these audits done and they would show all kinds of problems in a department and things to do to fix them, and then they would never be fixed. And I thought, what are we doing here if we're not fixing these problems? So, it's for those reasons that I incredibly prosperous future. And so that's what I hope to do.
Thank you for your response. Sorry, we were losing you a bit, but I got the audio for that last part though. Oh, everything. Oh, there we go. It was lagging out again. Sorry. But yeah, we'll move into our time portion. So if you want some time, you can readjust maybe some of your Wi-Fi, but I'll explain to the audience how we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna give Bud 5 questions, and he will have 2 minutes each to answer each question. Differently than the debates or anything, I have a timer so people can actually see that he can see that there's how many seconds he has left, or you guys can also see the time as well. So that's something very convenient that they don't do at the debates. I actually just noticed that. But I think if you're ready to go, just give me a thumbs up.
I think I'm close enough to my router that we should be a little better here.
Cool. So yeah, just give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go here. Cool.
I'm ready.
All right. And these are questions that are from the community. These are questions that other candidates that I've interviewed have been asked as well. So let me make sure everything's good. Okay. All right. First question. What is one way we can diversify our economy outside of tourism?
Well, that's a good question. I would preface that by saying we can diversify our economy only if we salvage it. Right now, tourism is just out. There's no tourism happening. And so we want to diversify, but we can't diversify until our economy is rolling. It's like this, it's my wife, she was the one that told me it seems like we're in a boat that's sinking and we have a bucket called tourism. And there's a bilge pump in the corner called diversification, but the bilge pump is going to take 8 hours to assemble. We don't have time to assemble the bilge pump. We have to allow the tourists to come in, and really, I think only then will we have the economic stability in order to diversify. And so with that said, I think one of the first things that we should do is that we should grow our own food. Our islands import 90% of our produce, and that is just not a sustainable future. That's not the way. We should not be so dependent. If we have mangoes coming in from Peru and bananas from Ecuador, burning fossil fuel to get here, it just doesn't make sense when we can and we should grow those on our own. Now, 47% of our land is zoned for agriculture. So somehow or another, there are other things in place that are prohibiting people, or the cost of farming is too high. But we need to change that. And from that foundation, or that sort of ground level diversification, we need to grow our food. And if we can use the tourism to be part of agritourism, or sort of just a new model where our tourists are not only going to beaches and Waikiki, but we can start using farming as a way to not just draw tourists, but we need to have our own food. In Hawaii, we need to grow our own food, support local farming. And that's the first area of, did I run out of time?
Okay. All right, next question. So the community on Oahu has been split over issues such as renewable energy infrastructures and recreational complexes. How do you plan on getting everybody to come into agreement on these community issues?
Well, one of the advantages that we have, and it's not a pleasant advantage, but we are going to have some major losses in our tax revenues. So we're going to have to reprioritize where we spend and how we spend. And I foresee that we are going to have to streamline and make our services very specific, and they have to be the core essential services of the government. And if there's extra, then we can start talking about programs that we want to do. But the first thing is that we need to fix the roads. We can't allow the money to be absorbed into the rail project anymore. And once we begin doing that, in Hawaii, we have some of the worst roads in the nation. We rank 47th of all the states. We rank 50th when it comes to rural road conditions and 48th when it comes to urban road conditions. So that's one of those core essential services that we have to provide. The other thing is upgrading our water systems. They stopped doing that not too long ago just because of the cost, but those are things that when they break, they cause more slowdowns, more problems for people. So the water systems need to be upgraded, and also the abandoned vehicles. In my neighborhood, they're particularly bad. On the west side, they're bad. But that takes not just collecting, but enforcement. We need to enforce the laws against dumping so that we can clean up our land. We can't have the Aloha State if we're filled with rubbish. And so those are areas that I would focus on first. And then when it comes to community things that we would like to do, then we'll pursue those when we find out the amount of money that we have.
All right. On to the next question. How would you handle the homelessness problem occurring here on Oahu?
Well, two things with the homeless problem. And homeless people in Hawaii, oftentimes they refer to themselves as houseless because Hawaii is their home. They just don't have a house, which I understand that. Hundreds of years ago, Hawaiians who lived in the valley would move to the beach for the whole summer. And that was just a part of our way of life. So we have to decipher between those who have been shipped over, because many of the homeless population have been moved here because it's more convenient for other cities, and they come, they've flown over on one-way tickets. But that's a problem. We're not able to bear the burden of other communities and the social services that are needed. So I believe that one of the ways that we can address this is having public-private partnerships in local communities. A top-down approach where the government provides a place that's centrally located for the houseless population will not be used. People don't want to leave Makakilo, Waianae. They don't want to leave Waimanalo to go and stay in a centralized place. They need to be by their roots. And that's important because they have family and cousin, usually in the areas that they live. So the way that we can serve them is on their level in their community. And then we can begin to do the enforcement. There's an area right next to me called Mahiai, Hui Mahiai Aina, and used to be called Kauhale. It's a homeless shelter that was put up by a citizen just on her own. She has some property behind her house, and she's been trying to get a permit for 5 years. They wouldn't give anything to her, but when coronavirus came, she just did it as an emergency measure. And they have about 30 people there. They're safe. They have rules. They have a curfew. They're doing very well. The only thing she needs is cooperation from the city and the state, something that I intend to do. And that's the way forward.
All right. Thank you for that response. Next question. What would you have done differently in response to the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, the coronavirus pandemic many of the responses were based on the imperial model written by a guy by the name of Neil Ferguson, who took numbers from the World Health Organization. And those numbers were that there was a case fatality rate of 3.4%. He said that 2.2 million people would die in the United States, 500,000 in England. Now, those numbers were wildly off. They were wildly off. The imperial model was wrong. And it was based on that model that we made our initial projections and we had our initial lockdowns. But initially, we were told to flatten the curve. The curve has been flattened. What we should do is that we should protect those who are most vulnerable, those who are elderly and in care homes. And we should just keep our eye on the hospital services, the emergency rooms. If our purpose was to flatten the curve, then we should realize that there will be an acceptable number of infections. We shouldn't be worried about the numbers because many of the cases are asymptomatic. The case fatality rate is less than 1%. It's closer between 0.2 and 0.4%, and possibly as low as 0.1%, which is about the level of the flu. And so we have just an absolute crashing of our economy for something that has the same case fatality rate as the flu. Now so I would take a more moderate approach to this. I believe that people will keep themselves safe if they deem it necessary to wear a mask, especially if they're working with an elderly person or they're caring for a loved one who is vulnerable or who has pre-existing conditions, and many people do, and they know that. Then allow them to protect themselves. But we have to allow our economy to run on so that we don't suffer the catastrophic loss that leads to poverty, suicide, domestic abuse, violence, and just a collapsing of our civilization.
All right, thank you for that response. Last question. What is one change that you would make in order for city council to be more effective?
For the city council to be more effective, well, there's a challenge that I am looking forward to addressing, but we are going to have a new crop of candidates, and I'm excited for them. These are people that have decided to run during some difficult times. There's going to be some budget difficulties, but they're zealous and they're eager, and I really want to work together with them. Now, how? Well, we'll see how that goes. But I look forward to having a good relationship with them and proposing things that they can support and I can support together. So that remains to be seen, but I'll leave it at that I'm excited to work with these new people that are coming in.
All right. And one question I like to ask all my guests is, what does Talk Story mean to you? That phrase, Talk Story, what does that mean to you?
Oh, that's our age-old local way of hanging out, sitting on the patio or in the backyard and just reminiscing about what happened over the course of the day or the week and connecting with family or friends. It's pretty much Pacific-wide. I think most Pacific Islanders, even from different cultures or language, they have a concept of talking story. And so you're embodying that. It's a great thing.
Thank you. And once again, Bud, thank you for joining us here on Talk Story, and thank you for sharing your heart about why you're running for mayor, and good luck to you, sir. And
thank you.
How can people find out more information about you?
Well, they can go to my website. It's Bud Stonebraker at budstonebreaker.com. And of course, I'm active on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and that's where a lot of interaction happens. So budstonebreaker.com, and you can find me on Facebook and so forth.
Awesome.
And thank you for your patience with me moving around, finding the best Wi-Fi spot.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I mean, I want to give you the best opportunity to talk to the people here. So
thank you, Gaven.
Of course. And guys, thank you for joining us here. Thank you for listening to Bud and myself. Please remember to vote. Ballots go out July 21st, I believe. And, this is a very important election. There's a lot of candidates running for different positions. Please educate yourself on who's running and why they're running and what they're doing in the community. It's very important. And guys, thank you for joining us. We hope you have a great day. Stay blessed.
Aloha.